Hey everyone, it's Bradley Rosa with the Broward Bar Buzz. I'm here with my buddy Rick Elsley, who is a longtime trial lawyer here in Broward County, 20 plus years. And recently he's evolved his practice also to arbitration and mediation. But first we're going to start with trial. So welcome, Rick.
Thank you, Bradley. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful.
It's my first time doing one of these podcasts.
Yeah, I hear you. And it's unnerving initially because
no, it's good.
Good. So tell us just give us a short bio about yourself so people know who you are and what you've done.
Well, my name is Rick Elsley. I grew up here in Cooper City. I've been practicing law about 26 years, graduated from college and law school at the University of Florida. So I'm local, South Florida kid, and I have been practicing in plantations probably since 2009 when we started our firm. I do trial work. I'm a board certified civil trial lawyer. Been recertified about 5 times. We have only 1% of the bar in the state of Florida is board certified. And I was president of the Broward County Trial Lawyers Association. I'm very active in that group, and always enjoyed working with the trial lawyers and also the Broward County Bar Association. My practice is plaintiff side personal injury and insurance coverage. So what that means is, car accidents, trip and falls, any ways that people can get hurt, medical malpractice, premises liability. I've had cases involving boats, planes, motorcycles, scooters.
Sounds like a John Candy movie.
Yeah, planes, trains, and automobiles. That's actually one of my favorites.
Yeah,
yeah,
movie.
That's an old one.
We just dated ourselves.
Yeah, well, that was the 80s, man.
Yeah.
We're 80s kids.
It was a good time.
I can't believe I'm going to be 52 years old in February. I mean, unbelievable. So
moving on.
Fast. Yep.
Moving on. So you are a trial lawyer that really focuses on personal injury and helping people that unfortunately have sustained terrible injuries. And you've had various interesting cases. Recently you dealt with a case, someone in a truck who was hurt terribly. What are the challenges of dealing with those kind of cases?
Well, in the personal injury context and the wrongful death cases, the main challenge is establishing liability. And what that means is, who is at fault for what happened. And most of the time, you're looking at the entire environment involved in a case. So it's not just like a car accident case, but you're looking at vision obstructions. You're looking at what exactly is the environment. In the case that you were referring to, this was a gentleman who was working for his employer, actually, and he was loading big, strong glass doors into the front part of a cargo hold on a box truck, and they fell on him, and unfortunately, he's paralyzed. His case was rejected by 4 or 5 other lawyers, and I got a call from a lawyer who asked me to take a look at it about a year after it happened. So another challenge really is getting the evidence and piecing together what actually did happen when you're starting a year or year and a half after the case. That happens a lot. Sometimes lawyers take a case and they don't really know where it's going, and then they don't continue with it. And so somebody comes in later. So I came in later on that case and gave him hope and his family. We did a lot in that case. Investigation to determine actually who owned the truck, because the police never investigated this incident. It wasn't reported. So all the initial information at the scene that you usually would have with photographs and tag numbers and witness statements wasn't there. So we did a lot over about a 6-month to 8-month period to establish multiple defendants had liability in this case.
Wait, so the police would not
usually
investigate? I mean, it was a terrible injury. You would think that the police would have done a more thorough investigation.
It would have required the employer to call the police, and that did not happen. Completely legal employer, legal employment, U.S. citizen, actually a guy who lives in Broward County here, great family. But I guess they were afraid of getting sued or OSHA violations or whatever it was. But the truck that was used was from a contractor in Texas. And it was sort of a mom and pop sort of deal. And our client's job was the foreman of the crew to try to load these glass doors.
Can you describe the glass doors, please?
Yeah, big, heavy, tall, and thick glass doors, and he had about 20 to 25 of them.
What were they used for? For what type of buildings?
Well, yeah. So they were used for restaurants, storefronts, things like that. And this was a company that shipped them all around the country. They would come in from China. So they came to his employer, and his job was to supervise a crew and to himself also load them.
Using some kind of tractor or
yes,
machine?
There are certain type of like hand pull, the hand carts. But each of these trucks, the box trucks, are in interstate commerce, and they're required to follow certain regulations from the Code of Federal Regulations and from the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations that require strapping of the cargo. And because there were no photographs of this truck that were taken at the time, and nobody after the fact, remember I got in a year and a half later, had photographs of the actual truck. The only thing we had to go on was a bill of lading with a phone number of a cell phone and a first name of the driver. So it took a lot of investigation in the public records of truck ownership and shipping, both in Texas and federally, to determine who owned this truck, because they would be responsible for those, the safety harnesses. And with a lot of work on the case, we were able to establish not only who the defendant was that owned the truck, but also the company that was involved in shipping the truck. And in the middle of the entire case, we determined and were told that the insurance policy on this particular truck may not exist, that the policy that we were provided after we found out who owned it didn't actually maybe include the truck, but they never sent us the part of the policy that would have had the VIN number on the truck. So we capitalized on the lack of information they gave us and used that as leverage, because that's not good faith. And they never filed what would be known as a DEC action, the insurance company, for a court to make a determination about whether or not this truck was on the policy. What it turns out is the owner, it's a very small mom and pop truck owner company, never paid the premium. So that there were 4 or 5 trucks that they had, and they put the other ones on the policy, not this one.
Not this specific one.
The insurance company paid the policy. We were able to use that as leverage. So this is a case where the facts really were kind of against us, but the way they presented the facts to us, we turned the tables on them and used that as leverage and got some money for this guy. The other defendant was the shipping company. And during the pendency of the case...
This was his employer?
His employer. No, excuse me, not his employer. This was the company that our client, knowing he had to ship these doors, contacted to get a contractor for him to ship them. So the shipping company calls the mom and pop company in Texas that owns the truck, and they're supposed to require proof of insurance and all of these things. This shipping company is a major international company. Everybody's heard of them. It's a confidential settlement, so I can't use their name, but they went into a bankruptcy during the pendency of this case. And this case was pending in Miami because the employer was in Miami. And you can't really do anything with the employer because it's workers' compensation, immunity for the employer. But during the pendency of the bankruptcy with the big shipper, we were able to present our case to the bankruptcy court in Delaware and take part in a mandatory, alternative dispute resolution sort of settlement process. And we're able to, I think, obtain a fantastic result on a case that had very difficult challenges for liability, because we didn't have actual proof, but neither did they, about the safety harnesses and the straps. We had testimony from our client that would have been made that it wasn't there, but we didn't have photos of that to corroborate his testimony. He remembered it pretty clearly, and fortunately, although the injuries were horrible to his spine, he had no neurological loss of memory or anything like that. So it was very clear to him what was on the truck and what wasn't.
So
and it was just his testimony.
He would put these doors
And
into the truck,
They fell on him.
and they're supposed to strap in,
Right.
secure them,
Yeah.
and they're heavy,
Yeah.
and they
Fell on him.
Yeah.
And he was trying to secure them without having the straps, and just didn't work.
No.
So the truck is supposed to have the straps. But that's one example of the kinds of things that we look at. My career has really been marked by digging where others don't dig and seeing maybe what others don't see or aren't willing to see, and spending the hours and spending the time and looking at the whole board, like the 360 degrees around the incident. So I've had a lot of cases involving vision obstruction of landscaping features on roadways like Oakland Park Boulevard, Broward Boulevard, 441, where you have medians that have hedges and plants that are higher than the codes say they should be.
And then the drivers can't see when they're making
They
a turn.
cannot see. And so several of our clients were catastrophically injured over the years. And the lawyers would reject the cases because the car that hit our client didn't have sufficient insurance coverage. But when you really look at the scene and you look at what the statements were of the people involved in the accident, they couldn't see each other. And nobody would bring them against the state or the city or the landscaping companies. I have done that at least every few years. I get a call from some lawyer who says, "What do I do here?" And I said, "This is how we do it." And we proceed on those cases because the Department of Transportation for the state of Florida is very clear on their regulations. Hedges in the medians can't be over 2 feet for a certain number of distance from an intersection. So it's designed so that people can see each other. Very frequently is not maintained to those design protocols. And these are expensive and lucrative contracts that these landscaping companies have with the city or the county, who takes on the responsibility from the state of Florida through what they call a memorandum of maintenance agreement.
So in those kind of situations, would there be, I don't know if it's the right word, but vicarious liability, where you'd have not
Sure.
only the city that has certain immunity, right, that you can only sue them for so much, whatever it is.
These
But
are private,
But the vendor that they contract with, they're liable.
private landscaping company has an affirmative active duty, not just per the contract, but because it is reasonably foreseeable that if they keep the median vegetation too high, that the motorists are going to hurt each other or get killed. And so many lawyers have not really done those. And I'm very proud that we have been able to take care of the future of many of our clients who had life-changing, catastrophic injuries in their 20s and 30s on scooters, motorcycles, even cars, and some pedestrians and motorcyclists, because we found a way to do it. So I'm very proud of that as a trial lawyer in those cases.
I've always wondered about those cities. I see a lot of that in the medians where they have these high hedges or just trees. There's it's a little of an obstruction. You can't always see clearly.
It's a lot. And if, not to get too much into the weeds
Right.
on this, but really there are regulations that there's the Florida Highway Landscape Guide, all of those regulations in terms of what you can plant, how fast it grows, seasonal rain, that's all in there. And the contract requirements that these big landscaping companies bid on and get paid tens of millions of dollars a year to maintain requires them to do certain things. So, I mean, those are always 14, 15 defendants involved in those cases sometimes, because it goes back to the designer. I had to hire a botanist on a few of these to testify as to how fast it would grow, because typically, they don't want to, the government doesn't want to pay the contractor more than twice a month to cut these things. But they really require a little bit more. So,
especially in the summertime when it's raining a lot.
and here I am giving all my secrets to your listeners. But I hope that all the lawyers take this and makes it safer. And I'm very proud to report that at least on 2 of these intersections over the last 4 or 5 years, they completely changed the configuration of those medians to put either just flat grass. And we're not talking about, miles and miles of it, just sections where there's left turns or right turns,
Sure.
And it's much safer. And that's really the goal of what we do as trial lawyers. We have a lot of organizations that lobby in DC, the American Association of Justice, and in Tallahassee, the Florida Justice Association, to try to make things safer for people, the consumer, the pedestrians on the roadways, the traveling public with cars and bicycles and trucks. But the only way really to have this done is for them to get sued, for verdicts to come back, or for them to make settlements, and the industry then sees it in their industry publications and makes a change.
Yeah.
And because of, at least in 2 instances, because of our lawsuit, they changed that. So that's not going to happen to somebody else, at least in those locations.
You know, I always say to folks that I have come in that do personal injury that the work you guys actually do as attorneys that deal with people who have been injured is really a noble effort, because we have rules and regulations that protect us from whether it's food, the water, all kinds of cars blowing up Pintos, you name it.
Exactly.
Because of attorneys like you guys that go out like yourself and fight the big guy and are able to hit them with that knockout punch to protect just every Joe Q citizen, right? Because
I have to tell you, I came out of law school thinking maybe I would do some employment law, or I was interested maybe in some real estate. In law school, I liked the courtroom courses I took, trial skills, trial advocacy, courtroom clinics. And I started with a very small firm in Miami on Flagler Street, Hoppy and Stokes, it was called, Bill Hoppy, who started board certification in the 70s, I think, or 80s maybe, with some other folks for the Florida bar. And I really got great training. I believe very strongly in mentoring. But it was very clear that without, small trial firms, big trial firms, people taking cases to trial, people pushing these, we would not have those changes. Exactly as you said, we make it safer. And, people give trial lawyers and personal injury lawyers a bad rap unless they need one. And I cannot tell you how many times I have people call me and say, I'm not a litigious person. I don't believe in lawsuits, but let me tell you what happened to me. And now I want to own that company that did this to me.
Of course.
And why didn't you get it to me, 2 days after I hired you? So unfortunately, it takes it happening to you or to your neighbor or to your family member for folks to realize the function of our system and the civil justice system, which isn't perfect. There are things that are not perfect about it, but it is the best we have. And it does provide some measure of justice and future, assistance and care. Otherwise, this goes to, Medicaid and the taxpayers have to help foot the bill for a lot of the medical care and loss of income for these folks who are suffering tremendously. So,
I'm always impressed with your practice, and actually I had not heard about some of the hoops that you had to jump through. Very much so. The grit that you had.
Yeah, I like to say to our staff, we have grit while others quit. I mean, we have grit while others quit. That's kind of our motto. We have a very small staff. We work very hard. We have fun. We like each other, which is great. But you have to have the grit, and you have to put in the hours, and you have to think out of the box and creatively. I mean, these landscaping cases, are unique, and that's one of the reasons I got the call for the Dwayne Haskins case. He was the quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers a few years ago who was killed on 595. And we just filed a dismissal. All of the defendants that we sued, it's all resolved. All the settlements have been paid. But that was one of those out-of-the-box thinking vision obstruction cases that took a long time, and you needed grit to kind of keep moving with that, and we did. So
tell me more about that case, and what were the challenges in dealing with that?
That case was referred to me by someone up in Pennsylvania who had heard about what I did, because Dwayne lived in Pennsylvania. He was a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, and even though I went to college and law school at the University of Florida, I'm still a diehard Ohio State fan. And so Dwayne Haskins had won the Rose Bowl for Ohio State and was MVP of that game and finished third, I think, in the year he came out for the Heisman Trophy, and first-round draft pick of the Commanders. At the time, they were the Redskins, and he was just getting his life started with the Pittsburgh Steelers, but he was down here for training with a bunch of the other quarterbacks. It was in April, off season in Boca, and they had a night out after training where they went to a bunch of different places and a lot of different things happened. And one of the questions about it was what actually happened on the roadway. And here's a very challenging case that took a while to figure out the timeline of events. And there were a lot of defenses that we kind of had to overcome or work around. There was some strong evidence that some things happened that probably shouldn't have happened. But when someone is walking on 595, trying to cross from the north to the south, just at the sort of bailout area between where the northbound lane is to 95 and the the westbound 595 lanes are, that little wedge they call it. And people are calling on the phone and saying, hey, there's a guy out there. They're calling 911. But then a truck comes along over a hill and is kind of on a little bit of an incline and just does not see him. There's a lot of questions as to why. And so we did a lot of research on that and found that, there was not an on-scene drug or alcohol test for the driver of that truck. The truck had several out-of-service violations from the FDOT that had it been inspected before it got on the road to deliver its gravel from, Port Everglades out to Medley, it never would have been on the road. It wouldn't have been allowed. And it had to do with braking issues. It had to do with bald tires. There were a lot of issues to that. So that was one aspect of the case. There were three other aspects of the case. Why did his rental car lose gas? We had to investigate a lot of that. He was stranded on 95 out of gas when this occurred because he had walked around 595, went to a 7-Eleven on 84 with a gas can. And then he had a $90,000 watch that was caught on a camera on him. And then within 30 minutes, he was dead and there wasn't any sign of it.
The watch was never recovered.
Correct. The insurance company on the watch, he had it insured. They paid on that, because they couldn't, it was lost or stolen. But there were a lot of unanswered questions. And so in these cases, just in general, the most important thing that we can do for the family is follow the evidence and find more steps to take. It's one lily pad to the other. It's kind of like those games where the path lights up. There's a light. You got to pick which ones. We're trying to find all of those avenues toward what exactly happened. And if it leads to liability on somebody or some company, that's fine. But if it doesn't, we really do try to provide the answers to people. And so that was kind of how I set off on that case, is to find the answers and just follow the facts. And that's what we did.
So Rick, these are pretty intense cases. There's got to be some serious stress for you. How do you balance your life, your personal life, with your career and the stress?
I try to exercise. I play soccer twice a week with a group that I started out of Brian Piccolo in Cooper City.
That's right. You do play soccer.
I've invited you. You haven't been out there. And
I stink at soccer.
But we do that. And I like to work out, and I do hot yoga from time to time. And I go mountain biking. My son got me into that a few years ago during COVID, and we've just been doing a lot of that. So I try to travel a lot. And one thing I always say also, to the staff is, and to everybody, just, you got to get out there and enjoy life. I give one of those, and people kind of, try to follow it. And you have to do that. You just have to get out in nature and be outside and do things, because nobody wants to sit in the office, 12 hours a day, even though you have to sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. So if someone wants to get a hold of you, they've sustained a terrible injury or a loved one, how do they go about that?
Well, the website is elsleylaw.com, ELLSLEY law.com. You can call me 954-475-1890. And that's basically it. I'm also under BrowardArbitrator.com because I'm doing some arbitrations as well, some mediations. But that's the fastest way to get to us, ELLSLEY law.com.
Wonderful. My friend, thank you for visiting, and I hope to see you again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the opportunity.